behalf of all of us at Theological Horizons, it is my greatest pleasure to welcome you to the premiere of Catalytic Stories of Faith at the university. We're so glad you made it here to the Newcomb Hall Theater today. We're very grateful that you're able to be with us for this special event. As you find your seats and get settled, I request that you silence your phones. Keep them close though, because we'll be asking you to use them for some live audience feedback throughout the event. When this program concludes at 6 p.m., please stay for the reception and be sure to take home a specially made card, the gift that we have created for you today. This event is not being live streamed or recorded, but all of the videos you'll see today will be made available on the Theological Horizons YouTube channel. Now I'd like to bring up Karen Wright Marsh, the Executive Director of Theological Horizons.
Thank you, Fifi. Well, good afternoon. I'm Karen. I'm the Executive Director of Theological Horizons, and it is my great honor to welcome you as well. You're in for a really special hour. It's going to be a quick-moving program of short videos, reels, conversations, and interactive exchanges. This is, as Fifi said, an offering of Theological Horizons. Our mission is to support believers and all spiritually curious people by providing a welcoming community for engaging faith, thought, and life here at the university and beyond. Our motto is all welcome always, and we've had a presence here at UVA for 25 years, so some of you are old friends, but if tonight is your first night encountering Theological Horizons, well, this welcome is for you as well. We're especially delighted to have special members of our community, Delaney Curry and Matt Weber. You're going to hear from them later in the hour. And you'll also see some familiar faces up here on the screen, university leaders, alumni, parents, experts, and others. We want your voice to shape this gathering too, this vibrant group of people and perspectives. We've come together on this beautiful October afternoon, thank you for coming indoors, to ask the questions, why faith, why now? Does faith and spirituality at the university really matter? So let's dive in. We're going to start with a 6-minute video clip, and let's go.
As a person of faith, and certainly through my observation, my study, my own experience, faith requires us to try to mirror and try to reflect what we are taught through our own study of the Bible, which requires us to be open to the stranger. It requires us to be kind and to be thoughtful. It's a higher calling for all of us. And in doing that, as we live in community with people who think differently, who have different traditions, it requires us to listen, to be open, to be kind, even as we are also acting to pursue what we believe to be morally right and true. And I think walking that walk and reflecting that for the broader community is an enormous contribution at a moment when the country is grappling with so much and everything feels so fraught right now.
Being in administration now, I work with a lot of individuals all across the university. And one of the things I think about a lot is like everyone, regardless of where they're coming from or what they're doing, they're image bearers. In Galatians chapter 5, it talks about serving one another humbly in love. Like, how do you go about doing that? And then a little bit further on in that chapter, it talks about fruits of the Spirit. I think that's how we do it. We live by the Spirit and we try to bear those fruits of the Spirit. So I think about that a lot as I'm working with other people. Kindness, peace, love, gentleness, self-control. How can I bear that out in my relationships with other people, whether they know that I'm a Christian or not. But I think having that approach, hopefully people notice that, and hopefully trying to live that way helps create a community of people who care about each other.
One of the things I appreciate about the university setting is most of the time, or at least a lot of the time, there's some level of diversity, right? You're encountering people who have different life experiences, different faith perspectives, different political perspectives. It gives people faith an opportunity to live out that faith in settings that are not like where they came from a lot of the time.
You're being challenged academically in ways that you may have been before or you may not have been before. And so you end up being confused a lot, or at least I was.
I remember someone saying one time, like, I had never questioned the existence of God before, and then I got to university and people were doing that. And so it forced this person to start thinking about those questions.
I want to see a new vision of what God can do on a university campus. And so many times, many of us are a little timid about talking about our faith or about Christianity.
I've found that there are a lot of people at the university that want to talk about their faith, that want to hear talks from a faith perspective, that want to learn.
I think being able to go through that process of both self-discovery and discernment communally is what made it a really powerful time for me, and I think for a lot of other people.
Really what makes the experience meaningful and change your life, if you want to let it change your life, is when you live in community, you're living with people, you're building lifelong friendships, you're in Bible study and you're talking about the deepest parts of your life with people, and that's what actually influenced me and made me a better person, made me more resilient.
Whether you are a person like me who comes from a faith tradition and I carry that with me everywhere, or you're a person who doesn't have a faith tradition but is deeply in search of meaning and purpose in life, and the way that you show up in your work or your research or your interests, that we carry all of this with us. It's naturally a part of who we are, so it's only natural that it would also be reflected in the work that we do, the issues that we care about, and the way that we engage and treat one another.
I think that I began to understand inquiry as actually a way of life, not as a path towards a destination where now you've solved everything and now you have all the answers. Because in reality, being able to be inquisitive is, I would say it's also a spiritual disposition and a spiritual habit that we cultivate in community that can bear a lot of fruit and can keep us from becoming stagnant in our spiritual walks.
It's just about having an open mind, an open heart, and open hands. And college is the right time to do that. It's safe.
Well, you've heard from Melody and Brian and others sort of getting us into this question of how and where does faith enter into our university experience? And we want to hear from you. So now is your opportunity to respond. I'd invite you to bring out your device, if you have one, and answer a question. We're going to show your responses up on screen anonymously and in real time. Go online and answer this question. Where in your day-to-day life around the university are you hearing or having conversations about faith? You might say, in my place of worship, or with my friends, or in the classroom, or with my family, in extracurricular clubs or groups, or it just doesn't come up in my everyday. You can even answer more than one question. So thanks, you're getting into it. Well, while you're finishing, I'm going to ask Fifi a question. Fifi, I'm curious to know, what did you notice about our audience's collective response? Is there anything here that you expected to see? Is there anything that surprised you?
Yeah, so I'm seeing some pretty big clusters around with my family, with my friends, place of worship. It's probably expected, and also with my extracurricular clubs and groups. But it's interesting to see the little cluster in the classroom. I think, especially now, to be able to have those conversations in places where we're not expecting them is super, super interesting. So, yeah.
And speaking from your own experience, Fifi, where are you having or hearing about conversations of religion and spirituality in your own days here at UEA?
So I'm definitely having a lot of conversations about faith in my own fellowships, in my own places of worship, and some of my friends are out here, definitely have conversations with them. But I've noticed this year that I've been having a lot of conversations about faith in my classrooms, or even when I volunteer in the Charlottesville community. Sometimes if you just mention, oh, I'm going to this event or this program, or I just came from this service, and then someone chimes in and they're like, oh, I'm also a person of faith, and that can spark a conversation.
Well, you will have another opportunity, now that you've got the hang of it, to respond to a question in a few more minutes. But now we're going to experience another bundle of videos, and then Delaney and Matt are going to join me on stage. So enjoy.
So my mother is very much so a woman of God. I've watched this woman be up at 5 o'clock in the morning, praying, talking to the Lord. And it's interesting to grow up with foundations, even in the home, that are so rooted in faith and still struggling to believe, right? And still feeling like, well, maybe that's her experience. But so far, it's not my experience. And again, even though I never questioned the existence of God, I really had a hard time subscribing to religion and religious practices. So being in school, when everything is a whirlwind, I've always felt this tug to stay close to God. And so looking for those community experiences that reinforce that in whatever capacity, that's where I knew my efforts also needed to be in tandem with other interests.
I think any time is a good time to examine your faith. I think as a 18, 19-year-old, kind of like what you were saying, a lot of people come into a college environment with what I, and not just I, would call inherited faith, meaning it's the faith I got from my mother, my grandmother, my family. But I think the strongest faith is the one that you have examined and made your own. And that may lead you in a lot of different directions, but it'll be the one that serves you. And it may be different than what you come into a college environment with. And I think that's one of the benefits of being in a very diverse environment and not just closing yourself off and just self-segregating with people that think like you or believe like you. So I think like in this kind of college environment, as many diverse backgrounds and friends you can make and engage in conversation where you're there to learn and understand and not necessarily persuade, I think it's healthy. And that may lead you away. And that's okay too, but more than likely people tend to come back.
If students are not asked big enough questions, they will not have the opportunity to develop worthy enough dreams that can command all of their efforts and imagination and intelligence.
Literally all you're doing all day, every day for school is asking really hard questions. And so it's just a natural environment to be able to extend those questions beyond the books you're reading for your history class.
Our kids can't
just accept our faith as it was given to them. They have to form their own. They have to own it for themselves.
I think about the world that they're going to encounter on the other side of university. I care about their college experience greatly, but I also see it as a ground of preparation, as a place where I want them to be asking questions. I want them to be curious.
I think the most fulfilling way to live a life is to be able to engage in your purpose. But first you have to know what that purpose is. And some people know very early, but from my assessment, a lot of people don't.
Genuinely at your core, what values make you who you are, and what are your values? Why are they your values? What feeds into them? What genuinely fills your cup? Because everyone is designed to be different, and it doesn't have to fit in a box that you see, and it doesn't have to look like what everyone else is doing, but it needs to be authentic to you.
I didn't want to be within a bubble spiritually, intellectually, emotionally. I didn't want to be only around people who were in the same stage of life as me, who maybe had similar career aspirations. I wanted to be in the reality of life, which is much more full and rich than that.
I grew up in a highly competitive environment where that was the thing to do. You had to be a doctor or a lawyer, and it just felt like there was some dissonance between that and actually finding meaning in it. It's natural to get into this pattern of studying, maybe going out to parties Friday night, rinse and repeat, and then 16 weeks later, all you've done is study without figuring out what your North Star or what your goal in life really is.
What's the bigger picture? You study this, you're an expert in this, you're wonderful at this. Is that it? Or is that a platform to build connections with these young people, to build connections with colleagues, to do something greater?
Seeing how hard my students are working, how much they want to succeed, the pressures they face as they work out their life on their own in college, I can't tell you what it means to know that there are people, loving, wonderful, beautiful people who are setting the table for them and creating a safe, loving environment to sort of welcome them in where they can rest and ask important questions.
Well, I'm so thankful to Delaney and Matt for joining us today. Delaney, you are the new UVA's Program Coordinator of Multicultural Student Services Interfaith Engagement. Matt Weber, our friend, is the Chief Creative Officer and Senior Advisor to the University President. And in these videos, we're really inspired by some of your friends and colleagues, other voices who point to these keys to generative college experience. And they urge us to bring our beliefs forward in our lives. So you're each people of faith, you're engaged in faith, questions of spirituality. You're people who are also deeply invested here at the university. You're here in our midst, day in and day out. And I'm curious to know how you would answer this question. What can hinder us from asking big questions, seeking out our purpose, breaking our bubbles? What keeps us from daring to connect? What might hold us back? Delaney, what do you think?
Grab this guy off of here for y'all. I love this question and this event, and I think it's already kind of been touched on in some of the videos that there is a fear, I think, of this, because if you're breaking your bubble and you're connecting, that means you're potentially also disconnecting from something else. And so even in my own journey where I did undergrad, master's, doctorate, even by the time I got to doctorate, where you'd think people had, maybe moved past that stage that we think of undergraduate education, they're still afraid to ask these questions because it challenges your sense of self, particularly if it's a faith question of, or you may have been raised in a way where you can't ask these questions because it's seen as doubt versus seen as maybe this opportunity to engage differently. And so I think this fear and this tension really keeps people kind of from engaging in those ways a lot of the times.
Thank you. Matt, what comes up for you?
Sure, I mean, I agree with all of that. That's a great answer. To me, it ends up being around two in addition to that. not having fully formed answers to those questions, and therefore having some anxiety that they shouldn't be processing out loud, that it needs to be all decided internally, and then when I'm ready and I figured it out, then we'll have the conversation. And as my wife will tell me, I'm an external processor, right? So I think it's important to have these big conversations and not to be afraid or to have anxiety to do them in a space where it might get messy. To have those questions in the sort of proverbial sandbox where you might build something and knock it down, and then you might build something and wish it stayed there forever. But to be in the sandbox with others, not afraid to have those conversations, but also not afraid to not know fully exactly how you feel, because me at 42 versus me at 22 versus me at 6, right? They're all different perspectives on faith.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, other ideas about how we can overcome these barriers. We have a number of undergrads here today, and of course grown-ups, and we're all having these struggles. Do you see this happening around UVA, where we're breaking down barriers or shifting, changing to make space for these conversations, or breaking these bubbles, asking questions? What do you think, Matt?
Sure. I mean, I think you kind of have to put yourself out there a little bit, right? And back to the question of, people want to have these conversations, but you just don't know when or how or if appropriate. Some of it's, you throw some seeds out there and see what grows. And I think the example from the video was, or maybe Fifi, were you sharing that, like, sometimes you just in conversation say that you went to church this weekend, or I said a prayer the other day, or, when I was in Catholic schools from kindergarten all the way through grad school, 20 straight years, it was very normal and pro forma to say a blessing before you were having a meal in any of the cafeterias. The second I stepped out of a Catholic school environment and was in a private secular university environment, I was like, I don't know what people are going to say if I do this. And I found myself questioning if my faith wasn't as strong as I thought it was when I was like saying grace like this secretly or whatever, and trying to figure out what that meant, whether my faith was really tested or strong in an environment where it isn't the status quo. So I think it's taking a little bit of risk. It's planting some seeds and seeing what grows, and knowing fully, like, you may swing and miss, and that's okay as long as it's done in a respectful community.
What do you think, Delaney?
Yeah, I think that's really a good start, and the Catholic school thing kind of made me laugh. I'm just over in the corner because so many people, I think, feel that way. I think me, and this is maybe coming, I have a background in communication, you need to have a generous communication partner. So you need a safe space, and so not a space where no one can counter you or ask questions, but you yourself need to recognize, a question is not an offensive. You don't have to go on the defense if someone says, why do you feel this way, or why do you think God exists? I think a lot of people's gut, particularly in Christian communities too, is to say like, well, I know this because I can cite the scripture or do this thing, but listen to the question as an invitation rather than as an affront, and find someone who is saying it as a question rather than an affront, and have that generous conversation. So listen really openly, be empathetic, don't be, feeling like you always have to be on your back foot defending your faith, but just saying, you know what, that's a good point. I was raised thinking this way, or I heard this in class or in church this weekend, but what do you think, right? Like opening it up. That doesn't make you a worse person of faith. It doesn't mean that you don't know, or that there's some expectation that you should be, fully formed in these ways. Nobody is. So just being willing to talk about it, I think, and having someone or some space that is dedicated to that, where someone enters into agreement and says, hey, we're not gonna argue, we're not gonna proletize here, like we're just gonna talk. So as someone that came from a classroom background, I tried to make my classroom that. Here on campus, I try to make the events that I do that, where if you're entering this space for this conversation, you're entering for a conversation, not for an argument, right? So having that generous conversation, both as listener and speaker, I think can also really help folks reframe these conversations.
Karen, can I give you a shout out? I've seen your work and what this group does, and I think if you're all here on a Friday at 5, you're all fans of what Karen and Theological Horizons does. I mean, it's done with a little bit of a twist. It's not your typical organization. It's done with an eye to the aesthetic. All of the posters, the flow, the format, the fact that there's just those videos, they're not iPhone videos. It's high quality. And I think like what your organization does, as an example here at UVA, is remarkable in that it takes into account truth, beauty, and goodness, involves some really strong communications, and allows it to break through the noise of all of the other things that are happening. And there's other many wonderful things here, but I think what you do distinctively is you take the model and you add an extra dash of special to it. And I think that really helps in terms of getting people to come to something, or whether it's like the good food that you're offering, the times in which you're offering it, and the way things look. It really does matter.
That's great.
And I'm not just saying that because I'm up here next to you.
We'll put a little something extra in his mocktail. So thanks, Matt. No, that means a lot. Thank you for both of you for being here tonight and adding to this conversation. Thank you. Well, we're going to watch a little more video, and we're going to continue the conversation after that. Okay.
I started the Save Darfur group at UVA, learning about that and starting that without having some inkling that there was like a divine being that loved all people and that it wasn't all on me. I think I started at UVA and I still fall into this trap thinking if I don't do it, no one will. Like if I don't save this kid in Darfur, like this kid's gonna die. What I learned through these girls at UVA who were very much mentored by Theological Horizons was that God's got it. And it's like a minute by minute problem I still face of thinking like I have all the answers and like my 24 hours a day has to go to helping save everyone, but really like God saved me, and that's enough.
There's a lot of not just talk, but meaningful input by many that would say higher education will drive you further from faith. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. For me, it's actually been the opposite. The more knowledge I gain, the more books I read, the more research I do, the more methodological strategies I employ to push the knowledge base forward in my particular field, the more finite I recognize that I am. And that there's something greater. That how I got here, while we can explain a lot, just gets supernatural at some point. And where I'm going and how to figure out those decisions, I can learn a lot, make some informed decisions, but always at a certain point, it's beyond me. That's something that I think as time has gone on has only been reinforced. And it's freeing. Because then I can gain all the knowledge and use the gifts God's given me to advance this field of study and to support students and all of the things as best I can, knowing that at the end of the day, it's actually not me at all. I'm kind of a tool, if you will, that's being utilized, but it's really beyond me that's making the real impact. So that kind of development to happen in the college years, whew.
College was the beginning of my adult faith journey. It wasn't mom and dad waking me up because we're all going to church. It was Melody thinking about what was meaningful for me and in my life.
And I think that's really scary for a lot of people coming into college, the idea of starting completely over, making a name for yourself, making an identity for yourself, and really just putting yourself out there.
You know, I had grown up going to churches and was kind of steeped in the Christian faith, but had not always been challenged to take a step back and to say, yeah, I've been practicing these things or participating in church in this way, but like, where does this come from and why do I believe what I believe?
Suffering opens a window, crises open a window, but boy, I don't think there's anything quite as wide open as those 18 to 24 years of your life when Nothing's quite yet settled.
When I think about college and the number of adults that are around university students, one of my deep longings is that those adults would come to understand and grow their imagination of what a huge outsized impact they can have.
When I think back on it, the students who I was really endeared to were those who opened themselves up to start the journey. Didn't always finish, didn't necessarily have it flow through the way someone might prescribe, but students who were curious enough to pause.
It's a fertile time for them. It can be very challenging for them. And so I think that the relationship between a coach, a teacher, a mentor, a boss at work can be critical as that young adult, as that late teen is trying to sort all that out.
There are so many issues, and I think it's hard for us sometimes to understand what those issues are. But I've loved watching my students grow into the kind of people that do care deeply about the world around them. And whether it's just their faith or whether it's lots of other ways, they want to have purpose and meaning in what they're doing.
It really helped me in my faith journey to have these forums for conversation, not just how do I solve this one differential equation, but why am I solving this differential equation? What's the purpose of work? How am I cultivating the earth? How am I caring for those around me?
I didn't want to be only around people who were in the same stage of life as me, who maybe had similar career aspirations. I wanted to be in the reality of life, which is much more full and rich than that.
I came to my faith through critical thinking because of UVA, because of Theological Horizons. And so I think college is the perfect place to do it.
These days, there's a lot of things that distract you. There's a lot of causes for anxiety and even pessimism. But the hunger to be loved, to know love, to love others, to be part of a community, to believe in something bigger than yourself, that didn't go away.
Well, as we were conducting these interviews, I think what really struck me is how many of these stories felt personal. And so I would love to invite each of you to tell a brief story, maybe a personal story of a time in college when your own faith was either shaken or your faith was awakened. And how did that experience influence your grown-up faith, if you will, and your life today at UVA? Delaney, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my faith was awakened and shaken every year in my program. So I did 3 degrees back to back, so I was in college for a decade. And I grew up cradle Methodist, right? So parents were Methodist, but we taught scuba diving on the weekends. So we were out of town, so we were not going to church. Like, I was Methodist, but it didn't really mean anything to me. My grandparents were Catholic, so when I was at their house, I would do the little this, but I never took communion, right? Like, I had some faith experiences, but was not into it. When I got to college, the awakening was just finally getting to be me. So my dad's on the radio, he's kind of a public figure, so I was always tied to him, or tied to my sister, or tied to my brother because they came before me. And so when I got to college, I got to be me. And I was like, oh, I think me wants to go to church. I think me wants to figure this out. So I think that kind of really started my journey. And then I was Methodist for a long time, and then midway through college, I figured out that I was queer. And that brought up complications with the Christian identity and the queer identity, particularly because Methodism was going through a really big shift a couple of years ago. And so that almost broke my faith, I would say. But I said it in an interview earlier for this project when I was talking before of, I got to a point where I'm like, I don't know if I even want to do faith. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Like, this is all too hard, but I can't not choose it. I think there was a time when I tried, when I was frustrated and tired, but I kept waking up and I kept feeling God. So my faith was broken, thinking I didn't fit in this community, in this space, but it really wasn't. I kept waking up, I kept feeling God, and I kept waking up, and I kept being queer. And both of those things were not choices for me. And so I did end up switching churches to a more affirming church and finding my identity, but I mean, my journey was rocky and continues to be, if I'm being honest, of faith is not something that I think I'll ever figure out. It's gonna be lifelong. And I wouldn't be working in this role if I didn't want to know more about other Christian traditions, but also other traditions generally, or lack thereof, because I feel like I've been there. I feel like I understand those things. So yeah, my entire college journey was finding it and losing it, but I don't think I really ever lost faith or lost God. I just lost the community that I had, but I kept refining it and kept rebuilding it, and it's never over. It's always continual. So yeah, all 10 years, just when I saw this question, I'm like, oh, every time, like every year there was something that happened that I found it again, I lost it again, I worked at a church, I stopped working there, I switched it, but here I am now. So something keeps me here. So
well, we're happy you're here. Thank you for sharing that personal insight.
Of course.
So for me, touching on what I was bringing up earlier, it was Catholic schools for 20 straight years, then non-Catholic school. Once you put it out there that you're Catholic and you're not in that sort of Catholic bubble, I had some friends in my cohort who said, that's great, you're Catholic, okay, why? And I hadn't been asked that question seriously since when I made my confirmation, which was when I was 17, and the answer why was very different at 17, because I was in the bubble, and I was thinking, oh, well, because my parents are, because my sister was, because this is a big part of it. So now I'm 25, outside of that bubble, being asked, not in a mean, menacing way, not in a critical way, but just in a friend to friend, why are you Catholic? And I didn't have a one-sentence answer to that question, and that shook me a bit, because I thought, oh, of course I should have this, right? Like, I should know how to defend why I am a person of faith, and I didn't really know how to answer it, so I decided to approach it in an academic setting, and I took up an independent study where I talked about where my program was less about talking about faith and more about showing faith. So I decided to approach my faith and answering that question through weekly interstitials and vignettes of how I live my faith as a 25-year-old guy living in Boston. And I was processing it through these videos, through prayer, and then ending up having those videos kind of be pushed out to say, this is the patchwork quilt answer to that question. This is why I'm still Catholic, because of this prayer moment for me, because of this sacramental moment for me, because of this moment of deep pain and tragedy where I was consoled by, my faith. And that helped me understand that answering the why question is always hard. And it's hard now too, because I have a 6-year-old. And he says, Dad, why? About a lot of stuff, including why are we going to church this morning? This is so boring, right? And then I find myself now less as a 25-year-old and as a 42-year-old dad examining my faith again as I'm teaching it. But I'm also hoping to show it.
Yeah, this is so good, so good. Well, we're going to see two short reels from some young alumni. It is Young Alumni Weekend. We're going to hear from Nathan and Caroline telling stories from their own years at UVA.
My first semester at UVA, I remember having a conversation with a guy who lived in the same dorm, who happened to be an atheist, and we got into a conversation about religion. And I just started taking religion classes because I knew that's what I wanted to study. And the deeper we got into this conversation, the quicker I realized that there are a lot of things that this person knew about my faith that I did not know. I had grown up going to churches and was kind of steeped in the Christian faith, but had not always been challenged to take a step back and to say, yeah, I've been practicing these things or participating in church in this way, but where does this come from? And why do I believe what I believe? What that pushed me to do was to lean more into religious studies and thinking through the history of my faith and the theology that kind of underpinned my faith. And a couple really beautiful things happened in that time. One of the things I realized was that it actually was in learning about the history and kind of the theological framework for why we believe what we believe that actually helped to enrich the practice of faith. And so it was really helpful for me to be able to find some context within the university setting, whether that be in the classroom or whether that be with things like groups like Theological Horizons, to be able to have a safe place to ask questions and to not be afraid of those questions, because we're doing it in a place in which as a community, we're holding one another as we are moving into those, sometimes unexplored areas of faith.
The biggest way that what I learned in university served me for was building community and just learning how to do it. I just had such amazing friends that stood by me even when I basically was throwing a fit or something, and just like loved me even when I was pretty hard to love. And through that, I learned how to be a better person, how to look more like Jesus, how to actually love other people, and I'm super grateful. And then with that, I had this foundation of like a family outside my own family. I don't think I could have been bold in my life doing my businesses and moving across country and all these things if I didn't have the foundational friendships I have that I made here. And I think some of that is because these are relationships that are Christ-centered and really look like Jesus. And again, people love me when I really wasn't lovable. And I think also just the confidence I've been able to have, knowing I'll never leave community. I'll always have it with all these people. That changes someone's life.
Well, audience, it's your turn to answer another question. So pull out your phone or whatever you've got on you. We've got a QR code coming up for you. And this is a slider. So you're going to answer a question. How freely do you own your personal faith commitments and views in your day-to-day actions across the university? So anywhere between my views are unwelcome to I am open about my beliefs. Well, I'm interested. Fifi's back with us. Hi, Fifi. And Delaney and Matt. What insight or encouragement would you give people in this room, anyone who is longing to be more confident about their spiritual beliefs or identities? What would you say to those who would like to be more confident and open? Fifi, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. So from my perspective as a Christian, I think maybe some reasons why I might feel a little hesitant to share my views and my beliefs is maybe the perception that people may have of others that share my beliefs as a Christian. And I think maybe people have been hurt by someone who's a Christian or hurt by the church. But I think that it's up to us to kind of be the change that we want to see in the world. And the Bible, it doesn't say that the path of a Christian will be easy, but it does say that God will be with us as we walk through this life. And so I think that as we're praying, that God will give us a spirit of compassion, a spirit of patience, and a spirit of love, that He will also give us a spirit of wisdom and discernment, because I think sometimes it's not really what you say, but maybe how you say it or the context in which you say it. And so praying that God gives us guidance as we walk and as we relate to the people around us, so that our conversations and our relationships can be more fruitful.
Yeah, I can go while we're switching mics over here. I think if you want to be more bold or if you want to be more open, join a community, talk to other people, because it can feel so isolating to be that one voice, right? So if you're in a classroom and you're like, oh, this professor definitely holds this belief, and so I'm not going to share it, or it's going to affect my grade or something, right? Find other people that feel the same way. If you're walking along campus and you're like, oh, there's a perception of I don't want to wear this shirt or this necklace or whatever when I'm walking around, find your people that understand you, and kind of to what Fifi was saying, be that change or recreate that, be bold in that, be smart about how you do it, be safe, right? All of these good things, but don't be afraid to share. And I think also kind of a more deeper question here is, if you answered that you are more hesitant to share, kind of reflect on why that is, right? So this is an anxiety tool or tip as someone that is an anxious person, right? What is the threat here? What am I afraid of if I share? And really kind of interrogate yourself there on, is this a perceived threat? Is this real? Like, how can I change it? Who can I talk to if it is a real threat to make things better? So I think just being honest with yourself, you have to be honest with yourself before you can share with others. And so I think figuring out what that tension is for you, figuring out what it is about the landscape that makes you hesitant, can really help you be emboldened, not from a place of just, well, you know, I'm scared, so I'm just gonna, as my friend would say, feel the fear, do it anyway, but not recklessly, not just well, I'm gonna do it without abandon, but okay, why am I afraid, and how can I rephrase that into a place where I can actually feel empowered to share in these moments? So I think it really starts with self when we're thinking about this.
Yeah, these are great answers. I mean, for me, the advice I would give is don't be discouraged and try to embody as much of your faith-based resilience as you can. Coming into a college environment at 18 and trying to figure out where is your safe space community and what that looks like. It might take the porridge is too hot, too cold, and it will be just right at some point, but you might end up burning your mouth, and you might end up, spitting. This is a metaphor that's going way down.
You have a 6-year-old.
So yeah, I'm all about porridge right now. So I look at it with my own journey. When I moved to Charlottesville 8 years ago, I came down with my wife, and we had a 1-year-old, and we were like, well, we're Catholic, we're going to join, I think, this church. And it wasn't great at first. So then it was like, is that a reflection of the community that you're talking about? Or is it a reflection of our time of life? Or is it a reflection of the way in which we're perceiving this community as it relates to our faith life? And then if we change the community or if we change our perception, like that, those are all levers and those are all variables that can change the way in which you interpret your faith life and your faith growth. So I would say, like, when I was in college, there were all these different masses you could go to. There was the 4:30 on Saturday, and the 7 p.m. on Sunday, and the 10:30 on Sunday, and there was the one at the other church, and there was one at the cathedral that was the high mass. Like, there's all of these different flavors in which you can be part of a faith community. Don't be discouraged if the first few you come into contact with aren't clicking. It could be a function of you're 18, there's a lot of change, and it could be a function of, like, you just haven't found it yet. But keep at it, be resilient, don't be discouraged.
Thank you. Well, there's so much wisdom here. Thank you. We have just a few more moments left. We're going to watch 2 short reels, and then I have one more question for our special guest.
I think there's a classic Sunday school answer of work is supposed to glorify God. I think it's a good starting point, but diving deeper, I attended this one class at the study center, the Christian Study Center, and it was on how work existed before the fall. We're meant to cultivate the earth. Your work is meant to not just have dominion over the fish and the birds and everything, but a better direct translation is to cultivate those things, have responsibility for those things, care for the environment, care for your neighbors, and to think about the outputs of that. Not everyone's going to be a nurse or a doctor. You have financial services people like myself. You have engineers. You have mechanical engineers who might do government contracting. So what exactly does that mean? I also thought about working itself from day to day. It also means caring for your coworkers, showing that you're doing a good job, not just because you want the next promotion, but because you are honoring God. It's not just the outputs of your work, but also the outputs of what you're doing on the people around you.
I don't have to know what's coming next, but I do know that I don't have to face it alone, and that I have got someone looking out for me who is right above me at all times, knows every next step, even when it feels like I'm in a storm or a valley or just a fog. Recently is how I felt, but I don't have to do this by myself. There is no point at which I'm ever going to be alone, and the comfort in that and the provision and just the sheer just release of a burden of I'm not in this alone is amazing, and it's because I'm with God.
Well, Fifi, Delaney, Matt, you have watched these reels and short videos. You've heard from one another. from our friends here in the audience, and I just have one final question, and that is, what is one hope that you are taking away from today?
One hope that I'm taking away from today is for all of you to know that your views are worth sharing, because that is how we relate to one another. It's how we get to know each other, how we get to know people from different backgrounds, different viewpoints. And communication is so important because that's how we grow closer together. And so when we ask God, please give me guidance on how to go about this interaction, we can trust that He will be with us and He will make the interaction fruitful. And even if it doesn't feel like the interaction was fruitful, we can know that there was that intention and there was love in that interaction. And then also going off of what she was saying in this last clip about community. I think community is so important, being surrounded by people who you can just be in fellowship with and pray with. In the Bible, Jesus asked His disciples to pray for Him when He was going through a tough time. So just knowing that you're not alone and that you can lean on others if you need to, and that you're fearfully and wonderfully made and your views are worth sharing. That's how we grow closer.
I think there's this very Ignatian principle of finding God in all things. And for me, my hope for you all is that as you leave this space today, it's pretty easy to be thinking about God and faith and all of that here in this setting, and then you'll leave, and then it'll be the weekend, and then there'll be a football game tomorrow, and maybe you'll go to church on Sunday, or maybe you'll do something totally different. Do your best to try and be open to finding whatever part of your faith is in some of the spots where you don't typically or overtly see it. So I always think it's really easy for me to be a Catholic 1 hour a week on Sunday morning. I'm reminded of it in every way, from the crucifix in the front to the Stations of the Cross around. But when I leave, in word and deed, how am I a Catholic? How am I a person of faith?
Lovely answers. I have to follow up both of those.
Yeah,
okay.
come on now.
I know. So I don't know if there's any Ted Lasso fans in the room. I heard they're making another season. Conversation for later. Yeah. But be curious, not judgmental. So as you walk out into the world and you're reminded of your faith more than just on Sunday mornings or whenever, share it and then be curious back, right? So be open, be curious. College is real life. I don't believe in the ivory tower. Y'all are dealing with real problems. There's very real things happening. We are not isolated. And also, you are so blessed and so lucky to have such a built-in community around you. As someone who just graduated for the last time, who was somewhere for 10 years straight, thank you, I miss it every day. I miss being able to have conversations like this. This is why I'm glad I work at a university. So really take advantage of the people around you, things like this, like Matt was saying, right? These Theological Horizons, I just refer to it as a force, right? Take advantage of this force that wants to bring you these wonderful programs and these opportunities to engage. So just really show up and be present as much as you can. And thank you for being present here tonight, too, on a Friday, like we said.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I have many, many thank yous. First of all, thank you to each of you for coming out, for cheering on your friends and your community. I hope that this has been a good time for you, a vital part of your life today. And it's our great hope, I know all of us, that you'll be a part of Theological Horizons and all the other communities that love and embrace you. I want to ask you to join me in thanking Fifi and Delaney and Matt. Yeah. Yeah, and we are so grateful for the faithful friends who you saw on screen tonight who are willing. Amelia's here. Wave. She was one of our great stars on film. You see her there. Who have lent their voices to Catalytic Stories. I know that some of you have been wrangled to do interviews with us, so it's going to continue for the coming year. We're going to be talking more and more to students about your faith experience. I'd like to thank the many friends and partners of Theological Horizons, many of you here who support this initiative, especially our star filmmaker, Drew Precious. He's hiding in the corner. He's back there. Stick your head out. Oh, he won't. And Ashley Fan, who makes beautiful things for us. She made these beautiful cards for you. They're on the table outside. Just lovely little cards for you to take as a gift. And Virginia Montoya, who's in Birmingham. And Christy Yates, of course, our mocktail bartender for the night. A couple more thank yous. We are grateful to the Lloyd and Vivian Noble Foundation of Atlanta for their great generosity. And this program is also made possible by a Vital Worships grant from the Calvin Institute for Christian Worship in Grand Rapids, Michigan, with funds provided from the Lilly Endowment, yay Lilly, We invite you again to be part of this ever-growing project that is Catalytic Stories of Faith at the university. This is just a part of it. You can see the reels, the videos on our website, on social media, our YouTube channel, and add your own perspective on faith in your community. So you enrich our lives, and we'll continue this journey together. Ashley, are we doing any book giveaways? Yes? Oh, Ashley's going to come find you if you won a book. You didn't know you were in a raffle, but you arrived, so you are now potential winners. Okay, so yeah, as you go, the reception's happening. We have a little art activity involving stickers and colors. The cards to pick up, the mocktails, Christy's going to rush back and start making those. They change colors if you haven't had one, and lots of snacks. Anything to add, Ashley or Christy or Drew? Oh, what? Hey, yay. Well, look, and we finished pretty much on time. So go in peace, enjoy the mocktails, and thank you for coming. Love y'all.